So we've been taking a look at Massive Darkness. And in terms of dungeon crawls, the eternal question, will this game hit the table? Is this a game that I will play solo, or is this a game that I'm going to play with my gaming group? Whatever that criteria is, whatever that it is, does Massive Darkness fill it? And with all my board game evaluations, what I try to do is explore what works, what's unique about this game, and then what are the stress points of the game. And I want to define stress points for a moment, in that it's easy to look at a game and say, this is the critical component of it. This is where it fails. This is where it doesn't do stuff well. I feel that's a little bit unfair, because every board game is a simulation. And we're trying to, this duality of narrow down the things that you can do as a player, because the game and the rules are kind of the AI in the game, and this applies to any board game, not just Massive Darkness. Yet at the same time, give an over-illusion of choice. Have a game world that's open. Allow us to make multiple choices and then layer in some dice or card mechanic in terms of randomly making things happen on there. So what I find is that when we're playing a game and the things that it does well, you're like, wow, this is awesome. We're really doing a lot. But then the game struggles a little bit. These stress points where it's trying to keep up with the narrative, or it's really trying to combine a couple of elements that it doesn't do so well. So if we look at the stress points, if we look at the stuff it does really well, that answers the question, can I live with this? Is this something I can play? Or is this something that's just absolutely, really, really going to annoy me? So Massive Darkness, what does it do well? It recreates this Dungeons & Dragons role-playing-esque dungeon hall experience very quickly, very fast, and very, very furious. You are putting down tons and tons of miniatures. You are hack and slash through tons and tons of miniatures. And this is in the core box. As soon as we start adding in some of the other monster kits and some of the other classes in there, literally the miniatures go into the hundreds. Compare this with Descent. And I love Descent, first edition, second edition. If we're looking at Descent, second edition, because it's often a compare and contrast between Massive Darkness. With Descent first edition, it's got a good amount of miniatures, the base, core. And of course, we're going to expand on it. But essentially, you're fighting 4, 5, maybe 6 at a time. And at the end of the game, at the end of the mission adventure somewhere, you're going to fight a boss, an Etten or a dragon. So it certainly has that. Massive Darkness is like, kick down a door, here's 10 angry dwarfs. Kick down another door, here's 5, 10, 15 ratlings. Here's a bunch of wandering orcs. Here's that minion, that boss monster of the dungeon. It is not just sitting on the golden throne waiting for you to knock on the last door. It's roaming the dungeon. It's pissed. It's looking for you. So you are overwhelmed, not only visually, but you are overwhelmed tactically really, really fast with these miniatures. I think that's a good thing. The tension level ramps up very, very quickly. Now, this is, of course, a component of its sister games, Zombicide Modern, Zombicide Black Plague, where you're literally going into this dungeon. And there's minions and there's monsters in there, but they're doing whatever they're going to do. You kick down that first door, the escalation timer starts. So you start off where you're like, I don't know what everyone's saying online. Fritz is saying this game's insane. It's baby cake. We're walking through it. We're crushing. We're getting treasure. But then the miniatures ramp up so fast where you're against this timer on it. That could be potentially frustrating. There's some people that like a flow of a game. They like it manageable. They like to make tactical decisions. When you kick down that first door, the timer in the game starts. And more minions, miniatures, plastic is going to flood the table. You need to hack through it. You need to slash through it. You need to magic through it. You will get overwhelmed if you try and just run around and level up and min-max everything and grab all the loot and everything. I'm trying not to give any spoilers, but it ramps up very, very fast. Now, here's the interesting stress point on it. And this could be a good thing. This could be a bad thing. That's why I say it's a stress point. We've got minions. We've got the trash mobs. We've got the wasteoids. You're just kind of cutting through them. There are numerous boss monsters, both in the core and as expansions. These randomly appear at random times and randomly wander around the dungeon. Compare that to Descent First Edition. Compare that to, and I love Descent, I love Dark Souls. Compare that to Dark Souls, where there's a boss at the end. Compare it to the type of game, maybe even Kingdom Death Monster, where you're fighting the elite hunts, the elite bosses of the bosses. But you are gearing up, you are going in, you're going on the hunt, you're exploring, and that is going to be the final encounter. Massive Darkness throws these minions and these monsters randomly at you. And the power level, of course, the challenge is some of them are more powerful than others. Some of them are really powerful. So the stress point is at the beginning, if you're kicking down those first few doors and you're at an early level and it randomly spawns, the analog AI of the game, the cards randomly spawn some tough boss monsters, you're in trouble. You might get wiped. You might be 15, 20 minutes into the game and just massively get wiped out. It's good, in my opinion, because it keeps you on your toes. It keeps the random, tons of replayability. It, as a co-op game, it really draws you in because now you have to analyze your skills. You're going in one direction. You have a plan. The boss appears. It deals lots of fire damage, so it's fire resistant. That takes your battle wizard out because he's been specializing in fire. So he's going to head to the back line, and you're going to bring up your barbarian. You're going to bring up your pit fighter. There's a lot of tactics that shift in the moment. But someone that is pure Euro, someone that is, I must control every element of the game, this might really throw them for a loop on there. So that's a stress point. But the counter is lots and lots of great plastic. The leveling system, the character system of the game. So kind of the holy grail of dungeon crawlers and fantasy games was this idea of a role-playing game, this idea of Dungeons & Dragons, or this idea of, I love Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I love War Master, I even love playing Paranoia, various role-playing games out there, to recreate a dungeon master or an overlord or a necromancer versus the players, to become attached to your character and level them up over numerous adventures, watch them grow in power, watch them grow in gear, distill that down into a board game. And some games do that over many, many campaigns, meaning you start with a character and you level up and you play 3, 4, 5, 6 games. You take them through a campaign. That's a lot of fun. But the reality, or I should say the potential reality, how many of us play these types of games, either solo or with a group, and you're eternally level 1? Or you're eternally the new character, meaning you play Descent First Edition or Second Edition, you're looking at a campaign, you play a few in, some people leave, some new people drop in, you stop playing for a couple of weeks, you stop playing for a month, you come back, it's a new group, so you start your character new, right? That this idea of leveling up your character requires commitment. Kingdom Death Monster, I love it, it's amazing. But this is a game much like TI, Twilight Imperium, where you need to have commitment on there. Massive Darkness does this in one sitting. There is a campaign element of it. You can play the campaign where you level up rather slowly, but default mode Massive Darkness is you kick down that first door, you're level 1 noob, you make it to the 5th checkpoint in the dungeon, or the 4th or the 3rd, whatever the alpha point is, and you're gearing up magic items, you're gearing up equipment, you're gearing up abilities, and there's this ability tree that if you're playing a barbarian, you gain experience, you can go to this tree, you can go to that tree, you can manipulate your dice, you gain powers. There's a lot in there. It does it very, very quickly, literally in one adventure. Now the challenge here, some people feel like that's too fast, where they're saying, hey, I'm leveling up just way too fast, and the power level is way too fast. Other people feel like it should be a campaign mode. But what I like about Massive Darkness is it gives you the option. It is literally distilled the dungeon bash, beat up on monsters, get some gear within a single play session. Or if you want to kind of narrow it down and have the campaign go over numerous adventures, there's the option there also. That's kind of the core. That's kind of looking at the good, and again, not the bad, but the stress points of the game to kind of help make that decision. Where are you going to go with Massive Darkness?